Hello, hello. Good to see you all and welcome to our workshop session today. Before we jump in, quick call out. If you are sitting by yourself on a table, we would encourage you when we move into the activity to join a larger group because we're going to have some table discussions as well later. Okay, let's hop in. I would say I hope you had a good day so far. This is the working session of the afternoon. Dean and I, like you heard from the Strategic Enablement Services team, and we will be talking about one of our favorite topics, which is operational enablement excellence. So we will be talking about what are some of the processes you need to put into place to scale your enablement function. We're going to get a little technical today, a little bit of content, and then we're going to get you to work so you can work with each other and exchange some thought. Now, before we do that, we will do quick introductions. So I'm Irina Soriano. I lead our Strategic Enablement Consulting practice. I've done enablement for probably over 15 years here in the US. I was out in Singapore for a few years and before that in EMEA. So I've kind of seen it across all parts of the globe. And I've also set up Seismic's enablement department like when I started here 8 years ago. This is my partner, Dean. I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, and I'm Dean Perry. I get the pleasure of working alongside Irina. I have been on the strategy team for a number of years and actually came to the role as a former customer. So I actually sat in the same seats as many of you at these events, and I looked up and I said, Seismic's got something that they're doing a little bit different, and I'd love to be able to be part of that. And so I came over to Seismic, and coming from a background of sales and management and enablement, I bring that perspective and I share that with customers each and every day.
Amazing. So let's go through our agenda for today.
Great. So we have a pretty clear agenda, and as Irina said, this session really is designed to be a workshop, so we're going to spend the majority of our time breaking out and doing that. But to set the stage, we thought we'd set up with a couple of different topics that would be meaningful to bring to all of you. So first, we're going to just describe and define enablement excellence. As Irina said, it's something that we're very passionate about and we work on very consistent with clients, and we want to give you that concept of a definition before we jump in. We're also going to review what we consider the core components of that operating model, so defining what the steps are to building your own OpEx that we think would be really effective to take back. And then that actionable step and case study example is going to be where we bring up one of our customers onto the stage and we go through some pointed questions to make sure that you all get to hear from someone in your position about what the work is that we do. And then, of course, we're going to end with these collaborative discussions and some whiteboarding activities. So hopefully you'll all find the time meaningful, and we're looking forward to jumping in. So as we kind of begin to sort of set the stage for you, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a concept for why this is an important conversations. And at the end of the day, that we believe that operations are what make enablement effective and really help drive that for your organizations. If you don't have this, then we see enablement as being something that's very reactionary, very fragmented. I think many of you can relate to constantly being on the receiving end of a lot of requests and not necessarily having a system in place to protect you and help you sort of scale your efforts. Also, if you don't have an effective way to sort of build operational foundations, then you aren't able to drive at scale and speed. And so with a framework that you think you can rely on, that's the comfort that comes with it, is an ability to scale and sort of make your work more effective. And then ultimately, the results that sort of speak from themselves, but better prioritization, higher confidence, more predictable delivery, and less reinvention every single time you go to solve a new problem are the outputs and the benefits of what can happen if you have an operating model within your business for enablement to help kind of drive your results. So we're going to touch on what gets you there here in a moment, but to begin, Irina, I'll pass it back to you.
Perfect. So what we're going to do first is just get us all on the same page. So what do we mean when we say operational enablement excellence? So think about it a little bit like an iceberg, right? Or sometimes I like to refer to it as your front office and your back office. So all the things that happen behind the curtain. So what you see kind of above the waterline here, those are the things that your field would perceive, right? Your onboarding, your training, your content, your coaching, your communications. But what we're going to talk about today are all the things that are happening behind the curtain or below the waterline, which is your governance. How do you run your programs, your planning, your prioritization? What we hear a lot from clients we work with is, hey, we're the fire department. Everybody is throwing requests at us, and we're just doing, and there's no end in sight. So how do you do this the right way? What are the right workflows? Are those consistent? If you ask different people on your team, how are they doing things? Are they giving you all the same answer? And then also, what are the metrics? How do you measure? If you were here last year and the year before, we talked a lot about ROI in this session. That's why we changed it up a little bit today, but that's important. How do you measure and how do you report back? And then also, what's your stakeholder alignment? Who are the people that you need to engage with, and how do you take them on your enablement journey? So those are really the core components. Why do you need to do that? There's really 3 reasons here. The first one is alignment. You want to make sure everything you do is tied to business outcomes. If it's not, usually we would say don't touch it, right? But you have to make sure it's set up in the right way so you understand if those priorities are actually aligned. Consistency, repeatable delivery model, right? So when you have somebody leave your team and somebody new comes on, think about how easy it is to onboard them as well when this is consistent. And then the visibility, just how are we measuring impact and how do you use that data to ultimately drive decisions? So why does this matter? Without an operating model, what could this look like? You could be request-driven, like I said, might feel like being a bit the fire department. You do a lot of things, but yet it's just unstructured and it doesn't feel like there's consistency. And then also it's just hard to measure. When you do so many small things, you don't have no time to plan, and then ultimately you can't measure because you don't even know what to measure at the end of it. And then you're just depending on individuals, right? Everybody's doing things differently, and you cannot depend on your workflows that you have structured for your team. It's just difficult to scale overall, right? So when we do this, we're more business aligned, we can measure, we can repeat, and you can scale. And that's where AI comes into play as well, because you don't have to hire new people in order to scale your function. You can also use AI to supplement some of that work, right? But it's important, if you put AI into place, you can only do that if there's already an existing process that you're replacing. It's really a core component here. Okay, so a couple more things I'm going to go through, and then I'm going to ask our guest speaker to the stage here today. So if you think about it in a curve, we often get the question, what's mature and how do I get there? So we're going to talk about those components today, but you really start, and everybody starts there. Dean and I, we've been in those shoes as well, like being in reactive support mode. Again, fire department, to move to coordinated delivery. That's when you start to feel that machinery is starting to run. And then you're going to start to have some rigor and operational discipline around what you do. And that's ultimately going to help you to get to a strategic business function, which I know some of you are already at, and some of you are not, and those are some of the discussions we're having today. But before we do that, I always love to hear from other people that are in my shoes, that have experienced the same things that I'm going through right now. So I would like to ask Lani Gaber to the stage. She's right there. While she's coming up, I give you a little bit of an intro. Lani works for CLA. It's a global consulting and accounting firm, and our Strategic Enablement Services team has actually embarked the journey with her for her enablement charter and for operational excellence as well. And today we thought we'd bring her up here to discuss that topic a little bit with her. So I can't shake your hand because I'm double-handed here, but sit down, Lani, let's have a little bit of a chat. So before we jump in, a bit more of an intro from you would be great. I know you are, I'm not going to say brand new in the enablement role, but fairly new, so tell us a little bit more.
Definitely, yeah. So my career really started in marketing, and I started leaning more into the technology side. So it led me to CLA about almost 4 years ago, and kind of helping to develop our marketing technology stack on the solution side. Really kind of doing revenue operations as well. And as I was continuing down that journey, and we were starting to get the adoption we're looking for, I realized we're really doing enablement as well. We're kind of touching on enablement and learnings and content and all these things. And so we got to a point where we need to start really building this out as a robust function within the organization. And so 1/1 of this year was really the decision of, all right, we're going to build a revenue enablement function.
And luckily, we were part of that journey.
Absolutely.
So, super. So talk to me a little bit about the first, 30 to 90 days being in. What were some of the things that you prioritized during that time frame?
Absolutely. So for me, discovery was the number one thing, and that was really learning from our cross-functional partners, stakeholders, leadership as well. How do you define enablement today? And it's crazy the different things that you'll hear, but it's really important to say, okay, where are we starting? What are the foundations that we're building, and also what does success look like to you? Because we wanted their buy-in, but also we wanted to make sure we were good partners for the organization and understood their business priorities. So that was the number one thing, and we learned a lot. And then we brought that to our executive sponsor and leadership and said, hey, this is what we heard, we're verifying it, and this is something we want to build out. Do we have your buy-in? Once we got that, we moved on to building out our charter and started to understand these concepts of operational excellence. What is this really going to take, and how are we going to refine it? And this is where, Seismic was along from discovery and beyond, but this is really...
Feels like a long time if I'm looking back.
Yes, but the pushback and the refinement to build a charter to make sure that we were, it was measurable, it was actionable, which is hard to do sometimes, and so that was really key. And once we were able to get to a good place with that and starting to understand, okay, what roles do we need? What's our team structure? What's the operational model going to look like? Then we moved on to that activation and started getting feelers out to the business and different stakeholders to see what they thought of it.
Amazing. And so you had some milestones you wanted to accomplish, right? You wanted to put new processes in place, and we're going to talk about some of those today when it comes to stakeholder alignment and intake processes. How do I run my program? Talk to me about how did you accomplish some of those milestones?
For sure, yeah. So as we were building the charter, I kept going back to this idea of it's evidence-based. This is not just from my brain, but this is what I heard, and I kept going back to those conversations and made sure that we were aligned with those business priorities. And then I would say, being a team of one to start, except for my two secret weapons on the side, Paula and Jen, it was very much focused on what are my strengths and weaknesses, where can I lean in, and then what are my first hires going to be that are really going to make the biggest impact. And for me, that was our content strategist and director. And so they when they came in, and that was probably about 2 months ago at this point, it was, what's her intake process going to be? Because I was starting to get all these requests and, leveraging Copilot
Fire department,
where I could,
hello, right there.
Absolutely. I didn't know how quickly it was going to come at us, but I guess it's good. And so for us, it was very much like, all right, we need to solidify this, and a part of that is, what discovery questions are we asking of them so we know this is going to be worth our time?
Fantastic. I know stakeholder management was a big one for you as well, right? New function and, the whole branding your enablement function, right? And people thinking different things of it. So I know you collaborate a lot, obviously, with the marketing team, the RevOps team, the people development team. Give me some of your major takeaways. How did you make stakeholder management easier for you? Because that's a core component as well of operational excellence.
Yeah, so for me, some of these teams were completely new for me to work with. Like people development, I knew from doing trainings myself, but I didn't know the inner workings of how their team was structured, what they were responsible for. And so, taking a step back and just asking questions like, what are you working on today, and how do you operate, and what's the 3-year plan look like, and just start to really make sure that when I was going to the conversation, I was speaking their language and I could kind of align with them that way. So that was the number one thing. And then, once we had that in place, we got to a point where we're like, okay, all these requests are coming in. Gosh, it'd be so great to coordinate all of this. And so the normal cadence of what meetings do we need to have regularly, bi-weekly, monthly, with both leadership, but also the people who are in the weeds doing the work was essential. And that happened pretty early on to start establishing those cadences and getting these teams to work together. So we made sure that we were removing blockers and driving things forward as needed.
Fantastic. I have one more question for you. If I'm stepping into this role right now, brand new, and I've never done enablement, what's the one piece of advice that you would give me?
Yes, so great question. I would say there's 4 different focus areas: strategy, people, process, and technology. And you really can't have one and not the other. I think all 4 are essential to build a really robust foundation and function and get it up and running very quickly. And so thinking about those 4 areas. I'd also say to continuously align with business goals and priorities is so essential for us, because it's very easy to get tactical in this role, and things will come at you fast, and you want to get those quick wins early on. That was a big thing for us. Like, we want to build relationships, we want to get quick wins, but that doesn't mean that we're going to do everything that's being asked of us. And we'd really challenge and push up front to say, hold on a second, do you need a piece of content, or are we trying to solve something else, really? And so that's how we made sure that we're continuously driving forward that strategic vision.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. Super. And we're going to be moving into our next section now. So we're going to talk about the core components of the operating model. If we can put a little bit of light on in here, that would be fabulous. And I'm handing over to my partner, Dean.
I'm back.
Are you here? You want to do this up here, or you want to go down?
Turn the lights on. We'll do this from both. We'll walk
from
around.
Both. Okay. He's adventurous today.
Yeah. So honestly, I think Lonnie shared a lot of great details of what we need to do to be effective here. But ultimately, if you want to jump ahead to the next slide.
Sure.
Good strategy only comes from having an efficient operating model. And so I think that is a really critical step for all of you as you're building out your practice, is to understand exactly what elements and building blocks need to go into making this effective. And so we're going to go through each of these in detail, but to kind of just give you them from a high level, there's always going to be a governance layer here that's going to support in what you're doing from an operational excellence standpoint. You'll define roles in your ownership. You'll have some type of an intake process that will allow you to bring requests in as far as what you're actioning. You'll have workflows, stakeholder feedback will inform how you're going to deliver, and ultimately you'll measure and decide how that impact is being felt by the business. So this is what provides the opportunity for you to scale by having a robust framework that you can operate within. And when it comes to those individual components, we'll give you a sort of a high-level understanding here of what we think is important. When you begin with your inputs in mind, you're going to have more success. And that really has to do with what the priorities of that organization are, what the stakeholder requests look like, how go-to-market initiatives are defined. But the reality is you need to know what you're being measured against, how you're going to impact what your organization is trying to do, how you're able to sort of work within your different stakeholder groups across different departments and make sure that their measurement or input is heard, and then lastly, make sure that the broad initiatives for the year are all going to feed the model that you're trying to develop for enablement. If you don't have these inputs, then you're never going to get to a sort of a successful outcome that people will all agree that is helpful and material to your business. Within your middle layer, you have this governance layer. So that's what feeds the overall operating model. Who's going to do what, and how is that defined? That's the input to essentially help you build this operational motion for enablement that makes you so successful. The Enablement Council is also a very critical part. You need to have constituents within the business that you can meet with regularly to inform what you're doing from an enablement standpoint, to collect feedback on. I see some head nods, because if you don't have those partnerships across the business, then you're going to just be working in a silo, and you're not effectively going to be able to bring that to the other parts of the organization. And last but not least, there has to be some way to prioritize and review those intakes as they come in to make sure that you're actioning the ones that are most effective. So we'll have more kind of to come on a good way to kind of categorize and measure those in a moment. But at the end of the day, you have to produce some type of an output. And that output is going to be your approved priority, how you're sort of choosing to go about the enablement efforts that you're choosing to work with. You're going to have your aligned execution, making sure that those activities and the things that you choose to do as an enablement team are focused on the requirements of the business and the things that you think are the most important to action. And at the end of the day, you're going to have some shared accountability here too, because you want to make sure that this isn't just enablement. Not everything is going to fall to being enablement's responsibility. Oftentimes, you're going to have things that are other teams' purview, and you want to make sure that there's some collaboration that's happening there. And again, not everything is going to be ad hoc. Some of this is going to be happening on a planned basis, and there's a fundamental difference between how you're going to respond to things that are coming in from the business on an ad hoc basis versus planned enablement programs. When it comes to ownership, this is, if anyone was in my last session, I spent a bit of time talking about this. There's a number of clear benefits that come from ownership. Makes your function easier to scale, supports more consistent execution, stronger collaboration, and it gives obviously better accountability across initiatives. And if you don't have clear ownership for enablement, then things can fall by the wayside and they're not nearly as impactful. But some of those groups that you need to tap into for ownership, there has to be the strategic layer of leadership. So oversight and sponsorship is critical for any initiative that you're trying to drive, and you need to bring them into the business and part of the sort of communication and rollout plan in order to kind of have that oversight and drive that effectively with people that might not get on board if that strategic layer isn't built into your planning. You also have to have that tangible program management operational rhythm, so people that are going to help you keep your programs on track, to track that effectively, tie it to milestones, give the assignments, and again, make sure everything is following a really clear plan with cadenced milestones and effective dates and execution points. Also, there's a variety of different things that need to be produced, whether that's content, whether that's learning, whether that's communication support. All of this is going to be sort of a required effort for the teams. And again, it might not be enablement that has to produce these things. Some of that comes from your partners in marketing. Some of that comes from your partners in your communications department. But nevertheless, you need to think about where all of these assets are going to be built and how you're going to kind of develop those along the way and inform kind of feedback or changes that need to be made. So another really critical part to think about from an ownership standpoint. And then last but not least, the stakeholder partners, your managers, your field leaders. Some of these might be part of your enablement council, people that you're continually informing about the benefits and the impact of your business. Some of them might just be sitting outside of that council motion, but you have to keep them clearly informed. They might be that eye within the RACI to understand what the enablement team is really doing to kind of drive this at the organizational level. So a number of different layers in terms of who you're trying to partner with. And then when you think about how this intake process works, this is sort of a top of the funnel example. We don't want to just be the firefighters the whole time. We want to make sure that we have a really robust way to process and action the things that are coming at us. So that incoming request is going to come from all different stakeholders across your business. You have to formalize that intake and review. Ultimately, that has to hit some type of a prioritization check. And there's some great examples of ways that you can categorize these. Is it going to be a strong impact to the business? We think that this is going to deliver a really good result. Is there an urgency or a timeline associated with this request, and we have to action it more quickly than others? Is this a broad audience that it's an organizational-wide impact that we need to sort of consider, or is this really just a small group of individuals this will impact? How closely aligned is it to strategic priorities or alignment for the business and those go-to-market goals for you as a company? And then lastly, but definitely not least, is the level of effort. How much resourcing and time will this take to accomplish? All of this should sort of be a combination of how you're screening these requests as they come in to make sure that you're then responding with the appropriate level of effort that goes back into things that come at you as a business from an enablement perspective. And at the end of the day, they sort of hit that last category where they're approved and they make the roadmap, or they hit a point within the queue where we can't focus on this today because we've got these other priorities which actually are higher up the chain, and then this one sort of sits beneath that. But at least you have a way to sort of formalize that so you can go back to your stakeholders and say, this is the reason why we're choosing to focus on these enablement initiatives versus the ones that maybe come after it.
I see a lot of you are taking pictures. You get access to those slides afterwards as well.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thumbs up. Good. I know there's a lot of content we're going through. Okay, I mentioned this earlier. Like something that Dean and I see a lot is when we work with clients, we go in and we say, how do you run your planned enablement programs? And we usually get a completely different answer from everybody in the room. And we're like, okay, that's interesting. No consistency overall. I'd say, 90% of the time, probably. So this is obviously very high level, right? Normally you'd go much deeper, but the point is when you are getting to, okay, we've gone through the funnel and we said yes to an initiative and we're rolling out a program, you need to have defined steps that everybody follows. And you should build this with your team, right? If you're leading the team, don't build it on your own, don't do it in a vacuum. And again, this is very high level from intake to we're designing and we're planning. We're deciding on the metrics. How are we rolling this out? Who are the people from the field we need to bring in? Who we need feedback from? Like, what is this whole thing going to look like? Get that approved and then get to the build phase. And we see a lot of clients are skipping over that whole portion because you have to move so fast. Like, this thing needs to be out tomorrow, right? So we just kick it out and then we move on to the next. So the build phase is obviously important. You're getting to launch, and then how are you reinforcing? What's happening after 30 days? 50% of the field has not engaged. Now what? Like, what's the action plans we're putting in place with your council that Dean has just mentioned? and what are we doing in order to get those folks on the road, right? And then ultimately, we want to measure what are the behavior changes and the outcomes that vary from program to program. You can't measure the same thing every single time. I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a second. But being able to set up this process, if you're interested in maybe building some agents to support your workflow, so maybe you're not at that point yet, but you want to use AI to support your workflows. Like I said earlier, if you do not have an existing process, it's very difficult to replace those tasks with an AI, right? So super important piece that we cover a lot. Okay, as we move to the next one, this is really the stakeholder alignment and the cross-functional engagement. I hop through this quickly, but enablement really only works in a partnership. You need to make sure you have your product and your marketing teams, your RevOps teams aligned, and then ultimately you have your frontline managers and your field teams or your sales teams if you're touching sales enablement, or if you're doing post-sale as well, obviously that group is a little bit bigger. And then your executive sponsors, and we do recommend having councils, different councils for those groups in order to make sure you bring your finding and your measurements back to them so that you can, drive informed decisions on what's working and what's not working. So you're not running 20 programs throughout the year, and at the end you say, 80% of them failed, right? You want to make sure you figure this out as they run. And then the last point, if you know me, I talk about this a lot, like I dream about this stuff at night. I'm a little quirky in that way. How do I measure the success? And I know this is probably something that also keeps a lot of you up at night. And really the 3 layers or 4 layers here that we're talking about is what's the engagement? Have the people that attended your sessions, they took your certifications, they passed, they looked at the content, they looked at your pages in Seismic. That's great. We want to start there and look at that, especially after launch within the first 30 days. But then we want to start to look at behavior changes. What are they doing differently? Let's say you roll out a new narrative. Are they using the new talk track? Are they using the assets? Are they sharing it with clients? Do those clients engage? How long does this feed into follow-up conversations, right? Those are all pieces we want to see. And then using the same example, if we think business outcomes, so we know this because we ran this many times. If you roll out a new narrative, you're going to see a lot of increase in win rate if it's done right. Or you might not. That's usually the folks that either were less engaged or they haven't really changed their behavior. But business outcomes could be anything from pipeline or revenue impact, etc. And then ultimately we want to use that for additional feedback and optimization as well. So those are all the different components that we run through, and we would like to move a little bit now in a discussion. Dean will set you up for this activity before you start running, give us a couple of slides, and then we're going to be down there with you, so if you have questions, you can just grab us, and we're going to be walking around to support you.
Great. And so ultimately, we want to get into this topic here about what is breaking your ability to scale. And so the conversations that we're going to have will hopefully be informative around this topic. And the way that we're going to follow through with this activity will kind of be twofold. First, take a moment. You've all got Post-it notes on your table. We want you to write down your one biggest enablement operating challenge on one of those sticky notes. On the side of the stage over here, we've got 3 different easels, and you'll see under each of those headings categories. And so those are each of the topics that we've already gone through and kind of outlined here for you today. I want you to take each of those sticky notes that you write down your challenge and place it underneath one of the headings over there that's appropriate. After that, return to your tables, and we're going to have a more of a discussion-based conversation. And the topics that we're going to go through are these 3 here. So the first is, where is your enablement most reactive in your organization today? The next is, which operating model component would make the biggest difference if improved? And then last, what is one realistic first step you could take in the next 30 to 60 days? So the end of this whole point is that we want you to leave with some practical next steps that you all can go back. So this is an opportunity to work on it with your peers and try and solve some real problems today. And if you can take a moment to choose a facilitator and someone that will be taking notes, at the end of that time that we're going to get together for 10 minutes, we're going to get back and we'll share some of the common themes that we heard, and we'll do a little bit of a debrief. So those are your instructions, and
Super.
We'll be floating around.
If you're by yourself, when you come back, you can leave your things. Just join another group so you can participate in the discussion. And Dean and I are going to be down there to help you out.
Eavesdropping.
So
That's right.
off you go.
First things first. Did anybody have a good conversation out there? We're wrapping up the day? Yes? Good. Glad to hear it. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about these things. So just wanted to kind of go around the room and share some answers for what people were chatting about. Does anybody want to talk about where enablement is most reactive in their organization today? That had a good conversation around that?
Anybody over here?
I see one right here, Irina.
Oh, okay. I come over to you. Hold on. Let me give you a mic.
Thank you so much. So yeah, we were actually discussing this. We're on our enablement team together, and one of the areas where we seem to be really reactive is around communications. Everyone has a lot of things to say, and we're talking, like, trying to peel back the onion and say, okay, but exactly what is it that we're wanting them to do? How are we able to measure that change? So just some areas that we need to be a little stronger there, but I also feel like we're reactive in communications because people have not been saying certain things, and we've been bringing it to light, and so it's just kind of churning it around. But we do have a pretty good intake process that we move through. We have good cadences where we put it in front of our sales teams, but now we just need to be a little bit more strategic on the communication side to say what is the impact after we've actually communicated it.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I think enablement is sort of the tip of the spear. You sit in between a lot of different departments, and oftentimes you hear things before other parts of the organization. So it's a little bit up to you to maybe share what can not always be great news with other people. But it's an important job, and formalizing what that communication looks like is important. Otherwise, it will just go nowhere, right? It will just sit with you, and that problem doesn't get solved. So good thing to focus on. All right, how about the second question? What operating model or component would make the biggest difference if improved? Does anyone have a thought there? Right behind you, Irina.
So our entire table kind of all agree that the governance and process management is a huge gap for all of our teams, different parts of our teams, but I think for my table mates over here, it would be defining a real sales enablement team or function. For me, it's really taking accountability across teams and making sure that there are defined roles and goals, and making sure that, everything is memorialized. And then for my table mates over here, I don't know.
I would say we have gotten shifted around in different departments a lot lately, so we're kind of just getting a little scrappy with enablement and trying to make sure that as the experts on the platform, we're teaching sales how to do things, but then they're not really getting the updates from up top, so it's kind of just becoming this messy enablement world, but yeah.
Yeah, and depending on where you are within that enablement journey, you're going to have different realities that you face. But cleaning up that mess maybe first is important, and then at the higher end, you'll be able to build that documentation and work on your governance model, which I'm sure many of you, it resonates that that's a challenge that you're all working on. All right, and let's bring us home. So what is one realistic first step that you can take in the next 30 to 60 days as you all leave and start working on what your plans of action to develop an enablement operating model will be? Anyone have a thought to share there?
Maybe over here.
There you go. I mean, you already know. Oh, we already met. I think we need a support group for teams. Seriously, that
We've
have
got it.
been,
Yeah, right here,
moved
everybody.
Or
Yeah.
scrappy is a real thing. I mean, for us, at our organization, we were building out a revenue enablement operating model, and we spent a lot of time the last 6 months, and we just went through a reorg 2 weeks ago. Yay. So now it's redefining it. It's enablement. It's almost like 10 or 15 years ago where everybody did enablement and then we all started having formal functions. We've kind of branched back out as my organization back to tool adoption, right? Go-to-market tool adoption versus process versus content. We've got a new CMO. So we've got a lot of things. So I think it's aligning. Governance was key for us. Who are the people who are making the decisions, and is there alignment to drive that direction? Because we can only do so much kind of at the business decision-making level versus really executive direction level. So I don't know what we could do in the next 30 to 60 days for that, but I'm cool to start a focus group.
Yeah, start there. Keep the momentum going. And honestly, in the midst of large organizational change, you have to stay focused on it. You can't let that be the distraction that stops you from working on some of this. And sometimes, I was having a conversation over here, sometimes you might not have those senior stakeholders that are going to influence that decision at the table with you now, but how can you make your lives easier? And sometimes that's a conversation or a focus group with other enablers and just making sure that you're on the same page with those individuals. Oh, great. So thanks everybody for participating. And there's just, Irina, a small little, for those of you who haven't seen it over here, we did have kind of intake, prioritization, and planning as the most sticky category, but it was a close follow-up with roles and ownership and stakeholder alignment. So a lot of commonality that we saw here today in the conversations.
Amazing. So I have the pleasure to bring us home. I'm going to give you just a few practical steps if you want to start as you leave here immediately. And the first thing that we would recommend, and you maybe started to do this a little bit today, is just assessing your current state, right? What's some of the friction, the gaps? What are some of the reactive patterns that you're seeing in your organization? And then next, to really prioritize the highest value component. Maybe you've done this today, so what you wrote on your sticky note, if you put it up there or if you have it on your table, that could probably be the best place to start here when it comes to operational excellence. And then really thinking through how are we aligning the different roles, the governance, your ways of working around that particular topic before you get into execution mode. And we usually say, hey, go pilot this in a small area. Let's say a lot of you had intake up here, right? So if you're deciding to build a new intake process, let's say you drive it through Seismic or you pick a different vehicle, or maybe you have like an intake process you can tag onto that's already existing in your organization. Pilot it out first before you then go and roll it out to the rest of the organization, where you start to measure, refine, and then expand. So to close us out, just really a few things. Think about building the system, not just your programs. Think back to what was under that water line in the beginning that we've shown you. Those things matter. If you want to scale your function, those things are absolutely critical to put in place. Maybe not all at the same time, but you want to have a little bit of a path forward how you're going to execute that. And then start small, pick one thing, iterate from there, refine, pilot, roll out bigger, and then make sure you also measure. And when we say measurement for operational excellence, that could be anything from time saving. How much time wasting are we doing because we don't have the proper processes set up? And then again, also when you're able, once those processes are there, to bring AI in to support you in those motions, especially a big time saver, which we know time is the most precious thing for any enabler. Okay, this is it from us today. You were great. Thank you for being engaged,
big round of applause for all of you.
participating.
Nice work, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day.